have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello, happy Monday. Thank you so much for listening to episode number 313 of the Bold Moves podcast. I am the host, Mandy Bryce, and I have a really fun interview for you today. I am sharing my chat with Willow Bradner, who calls herself the Accidental Psychic. Usually I share a little bit more about each person's story, but I think that Willow's is hilarious and awesome, and that you're probably already intrigued by the whole accidental psychic part, so I'm going to let her share it right away. But if you are listening with young, impressionable ears in the car, or you have an aversion to colorful language, I am just going to warn you that there are a few different words that teachers and grandparents might not be happy to hear. So just be aware of that. If that doesn't bother you, you probably saw that it was marked explicit and didn't care, but I just wanted to let you know it was there so that if you had to be protective, you knew to be so. All right, enjoy this chat with Willow. All right, hello everyone. Today I am chatting with Willow Bradner. Welcome to the show, Willow.
Hello everybody. Thanks for having me.
I am super excited to hear your story. You know that the show is called Bold Moves. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't made some. So let's hear a little bit about you and some of the risks you've taken along the way to get here.
All right. Well, I think bold move, and that just starts making me laugh right there because I was a very content, happy, very successful salon owner and hairdresser.
Okay.
And
you have beautiful hair, so I'm not surprised. Yeah.
So somewhere around the 13th year of doing business, I started to recognize that there was truly like lines around the block in my salon. Like I had lines of people, I had a wait list, I had people calling me on the weekend when I wasn't working, texting me at home and showing up, and all of them with similar messaging of like, you gave me really great advice last time. Can you tell me what you think of XYZ? And
so it wasn't about the hair.
It turns out. But I mean, if I'm honest, I really thought I was super smart. I really thought that I was just giving out great advice and that's why people were coming. But yeah, it was not about the hair. It was actually on my wedding night that everything changed. After, I'm sure every one of you who's ever been married or been to a wedding, you know that copious amounts of alcohol are usually consumed. And so it was very late night. Everybody had left but my parents and my new husband. And all of a sudden, like my body took this crazy shift and my voice changed octaves. And it was my dad who looked at me and goes, am I allowed to swear on this show, by the way?
Go ahead, and I'll just remind people to have discretion as to who's in the car with them when this is on.
So my dad looks at me and he goes, holy shit, you are channeling my father. And it was at that moment that my husband's late mother also peered through, and she started trying to speak as well through me. And my husband stood up as if to say, I did not sign up for Girl Who Speaks to Dead People. And he like full on peaced out for the night. And my dad and my mom and I just stood up and just played with this crazy thing that was happening and woke up, of course, with hangovers and total curiosity and wonderment of like, did that just happen? But that was the start of how everything in my life shifted, and I became what is now called the Accidental Psychic. So I now do psychic work and medium work, and have, speaking of bold move, quit hair and become a psychic full time.
Okay. All right. So that's definitely fascinating and definitely different wedding reception games or activities than I've ever experienced. So I guess to go first, I can't imagine my dad saying something like that. So I'm wondering if there was like a familial, at least openness to this idea or respect for the idea of psychics that, you know, so many people don't believe in your family that made this a little bit more natural. And I'm sure it was still crazy, but how was the attitude toward that regard before?
Well, I mean, if we're totally honest, again, we are all drunk at this point. So if there's any filter sure that would have been there in a normal day basis. It was certainly eroded. And then number two, yeah, like with a name like Willow, by the way, this is my birth name. I did not go out and choose a wackadoodle name. If anything, my name kept me from really full blown going for this initially, because I didn't want people to think that I had changed my name or changed who I was to be a psychic. So yeah, I mean, I come from the hippies. My parents, in the 8th grade, I was told that I was going to hell because we didn't go to church and we didn't, according to the rules, believe in God. So I must be going to hell. And when I came home on the school bus that day and I told my mom, the kids on the school bus are telling me I'm going to hell, she loaded me on the bus with, this is how old I am and will date me. She loaded me on the bus with Encyclopedia Britannica, B for Buddha and J for Jesus, and explained to me that Buddha was here before Jesus and we believe in reincarnation. Now, I'd never been to a Buddhist temple. I had no idea who Buddha was. I didn't understand anything she was saying. And I may or may not have messed up the word reincarnation. But that is the essence of my understanding of spirituality and belief system, was always in this very hippie-esque sort of variety.
Okay. Cause yeah, I don't even know that my dad would have the words for channeling someone else, and would probably be like, hey, you're drunk. You have a deep voice. What's the deal?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Dad is a smart guy, I'm sure.
Oh, he is, but that he lives in Wisconsin, and that's not a mindset that, many Midwesterners have. So where are you located, by the way?
I'm now in Colorado, but funny enough is I'm from Michigan. So I speak Midwestern fluently. Yeah.
Okay. So there are some Midwesterners. I mean, I of course believe that there were, but
but my parents were young and they were just different. I mean, to this day, my parents are riding a bike around the world and camping. Right now, as we speak, they're in Thailand on a beach somewhere.
Oh my goodness. Well, at some point where they're somewhere with stable internet, I feel like I need to talk to them too.
Absolutely.
That's definitely a bold move.
Yes.
I love it. Okay. So you had a hair salon, you were giving advice. Now it seems like there was a turning point on your wedding night where you really embraced things, or I guess were drunk enough to lower your inhibitions and allow this to happen. But it seems silly to not kind of connect the lines around the block with your advice and psychic abilities. So do you think that you were just not acknowledging them as such and still kind of being intuitive with your advice, or how do you put those together?
Yeah. So I think about the time that the psychic medium aspect showed up, I think was the thing. For me in my life, I'd always had these bouts of intuition. We call them intuitive hits or psychic hits. I'd always had that. But I had never really given it the merit that it had deserved. I'd never really been like, yeah, I know how to do a thing. It was like a drunk party trick always. Uh-huh. So the psychic medium aspect, the part wherein now those from the other side who have crossed over are coming in, legitimizes everything, is sort of what I felt in my heart. And then as I was literally coming out of the proverbial psychic closet, many of my clients were like, well, yeah, girl, of course we've known you're psychic. Like, do you remember that one time in your backyard where like you did this thing? Sure. And I wouldn't have had much recollection of the times where I was channeling before. But I can say that every occasion had been usually with alcohol included. And so I'm very clear now. I do not drink while psychicking. It's like, don't drink and drive, don't drink and psychic.
That's interesting, because I was like, is that the catalyst? Are you just drinking all day? I have a client at 9 a.m. I need a mimosa. No, I'm very well trained now. I've trained under some pretty renowned intuitives and psychics at this point. And so I'm clear about my boundaries and I'm clear about how to turn this thing on and off now. Okay. So for me, I lived in LA for 2 years, so I've experienced a little bit more of what people affectionately, although some people find it offensive, but like the whole woo-woo term, which I guess has mixed connotations or
even
reactions.
For me.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think sometimes that people in your profession especially are like, don't call it that. And so I use it carefully, but I've had some experience with that, like more than I would have, I think, if I still lived in Milwaukee. But I am curious because I didn't know that you can train really for that. And I think so many of people who don't know someone who is psychic might not understand how that works from day to day. Like you think of things on TV like Miss Cleo, and you think of, when you said being a medium and channeling people, I'm of course imagining Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost. So can you give me a little bit more of an insight into like A, the training part, and B, your day to day? And you said boundaries. So I'm guessing, you don't have that scene where Whoopi Goldberg has all those people shouting at her and all of that. So I'd love to hear more about the practical aspect of like what your life is like and what you do.
Yeah. So just to be completely transparent, my life is 100% just like it was before. Like I get up, I poop, I drink coffee, I drink on Saturday night, I have fun, I do all the things that a normal person does. I raise a child, I go to the PTA, I volunteer, I do all of the stuff. But here's the distinction, is that I am never going to be the psychic that walks up to you in a grocery store and says, hey, your dead people are here. I am never at a PTA meeting, like trying to tell whatever mom, like, don't worry about your career. I'm pretty sure you're going to get this upcoming job. Like, even though occasionally like psychic intel is going to seep through, for the most part, I have a very clear on-off button. And that came from the training. So what the training really is one, it's permission, because ultimately, like all of us have intuition. I'm not saying that everybody's going to go out and become a psychic or want to speak to those on the other side, but every single one of us has this capability. It's just that most of us have the volume turned all the way to mute and or just up to 2 or 3 on the dial. Whereas like for me, it was probably always pointed to like a 5-7. And then I was open enough to want to do it and to want to be sort of a representative of this other side or of this information. And so the training for me was ultimately at the end of the day, permission. Number 2, it was learning how to have that button of on off and having really strict boundaries so that I'm not acting out of a lack of integrity. Like those who give you psychic information, they're not in integrity. You've not given them permission. It's not okay for them to go into your space without your permission. And so that is a strict boundary. I will never drunk and read ever again. I will never penetrate somebody's life without their full permission. And that's what I've been doing even in hair accidentally. So that's a big piece of the training. And I would say like last and foremost for the training, at least from my perspective, and I think this is where that woo-woo thing that you experience in LA, really, 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 this is the difference between the two categories, is there are those who really work on their business. And that means like, I am always cleaning up my triggers. I'm always cleaning up my side of the street. I'm very clear not to project what I call my shit onto you. I'm very clear what is mine and what is somebody else's. And if I notice that I'm hitting a hard edge or I'm not being clear enough, then I know that I have work to do still. So for me, training is also, especially in this psychic world, is all about being a clear tool for the other side to be able to speak through into.
Okay, that's really interesting. So on a day-to-day basis, I know you said that you have like a lot of normal behaviors and you got very personal, even to bowel movements. But I'm curious, like the job part. So let's say I wanted to hire you. What am I asking you to do? What are you doing for me? Are you doing it in person? Are you doing it via Skype? Like what all does that look like?
So it's both. And it's really dependent on where you live, first and foremost.
Well,
like,
yes.
Yes, I can speak to somebody from Singapore over the interwebs these days, but as well I do in person also. So it's both and in that I do have what I call just your sort of regular run-of-the-mill reading, which is psychic and medium, wherein you come in. I always do what is called a landing meditation, and that is part of that boundary. So what we do is we sort of sit and we open up the channel. And the reason I do it with the clients who are sitting in front of me is I walk them through, one, who are their guides upstairs, the people who are working on your behalf and the people who are really making your life so possible, to the angels. We all have angels that are working with us, and they've been with us since our birth and beyond, and we can get deep if you want to. And then as well, we invite in those who have crossed over.
Okay.
So with those who have crossed over, I'm clear again, boundary-wise, there are variations of how people work with the mediumship. Some people are perhaps better at it than me in that they are able to bring everybody in and sort through them. I kind of keep them in a vaulted room, and we call them one by name. So again, it's not like Jeffrey's here and your friend Debbie showed up and Grandma Sue's here. And like, I'm not bringing in the whole party. It's like one by one so that we can get really clear about who they are, what messages you're looking for, what messages they have for you as well. So in every event or psychic reading, we're kind of going through the live, love, prosper aspect of your life. Like, what is happening in your life? What are you looking to get? What validations are you needing? And then what kind of messages from beyond are you seeking to hear?
Okay, that's super interesting. Now, you mentioned like people from beyond, and I noticed that none of the names were like Rover or Sparky, but do you ever get like pets?
I can. And again, what's interesting is people are like, oh, I'm so bummed my dog didn't come through. And I'm like, well, if you don't ask, I'm not asking for you. Like, yes, if you want your dog to come through, just invite your dog. But yeah, dogs are really interesting because they talk predominantly about food, their collar, and their bed. And like sometimes like a favorite walk or a favorite thing that they did, but they're very, I mean, a dog's life is quite simple. It's
right.
Like food, walk, and bed, you know? So those are
funny because without without the collar part, I'm like, that's probably also my husband.
So funny.
Speaking of husbands, you mentioned that on your wedding night, your husband was like, all right, what's this about? Did he come around, or was that a turning point in your relationship as well as your life?
So I think that we both have such high mutual respect for each other. And I think that's number one in any relationship. Some people think it's about love. I think it's about respect. And he, at the end of the day, he respects me more than anything. And while this woo-woo world that I have stepped into is confusing and challenging and weird for him, he totally respects, appreciates, loves me, and supports my choices and what I'm doing. And he sees like, I mean, I get gifts and cards and all the things in the mail for people who are just like, oh my God, you saved my life. So when he sees those and reads those, I think every day he gets a little closer to total belief.
Okay, nice. And how long ago was this?
10 years.
10 years. Okay. Hey, if you have a structure of beliefs that's different and have it challenged, that's tough.
Yeah.
Where in Colorado are you?
We're in Golden, Colorado, which is just outside of Denver, next to Boulder.
Okay, nice.
Trifecta of awesome.
Yeah, I love Boulder and Denver. One of my best friends has a salon in Denver, actually.
Oh, cool. What salon is it?
My Hair Trip.
Oh, cool. I haven't heard of that one. I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah, you should. It's magical. It's an organic, eco-friendly, like they recycle their foils and all
I love that. I will have to check it out for sure.
Yeah, please do. So I have a couple more questions. You mentioned angels, and I know at the beginning you had a very heavy trip to school with the encyclopedias. As far as I know, angels are more of a Christian thing, or maybe that's a bias that I have, but I'm curious about where your belief in religion or God, higher powers, how that's developed over time with growing up and being more mature, and then also these experiences.
Well, and I have to say I goosebump in you asking that question because one, it's not one that anybody usually asks, but I love to experience this one because I think I grew up in a pretty closed-minded house, if you can believe that. Like,
interesting.
Despite the fact that they were like, we're Buddhist and we're these hippy-dippy open people, it was really like quite disparaging to Christians ultimately.
Okay.
And so I personally have done so much reading on religion, so much so that I I'm a godparent for a friend, and we had to go through the Catholic godparent class.
Yeah.
And I, not being a Catholic, was able to answer more of the questions than those who had gone to like Catholic school were able.
Yeah.
So I take a real seriousness, A, to religion, and A, to people's beliefs, because I really think that spirit lives in all aspects of belief. And belief just being, if it is the words in a book or a scripture or an idea that you just, let's use Santa Claus because that's fairly non-controversial.
Sure.
I believe in Santa Claus as much as I frankly believe in Jesus, as much as I frankly believe in Buddha. And what I believe in is the spirit that is in each of these characters and each of these people. Like Santa Claus was a real man.
Right.
We now have him as a caricature, but he was a spirit of human, and he really existed, as did Jesus, as did Buddha. And each of them were carrying torches of love, as far as I'm concerned. And really the bottom line of the Bible and the bottom line of most of these scripts are all about love at their essence. And so how can we not believe in that? And so to me, that's what God is love. Love is God. God is love. It's intermingled and intertwined. The angels are, to me, non-religious, I suppose.
Okay.
To me, they are just a very high vibration, and they are, at least psychically, the way that I see them is they are the guardians of both worlds. Mm-hmm. So what would be our consideration of heaven and our consideration of earth. So they are the intermediaries of both of them. And one of my favorite stories to say about the angels, as just the best description to describe what they do for us. Mm-hmm. There was a Today Show with Matt Lauer before, ladies and gentlemen, the #MeToo movement. So back when we liked him and he was a good guy. And he's doing a story with a woman who had jumped out of an airplane and her parachute didn't go off and she lived. And so she's telling the story of how her chute gets caught. It didn't open, but it had released, and it gets caught seconds before she's going to literally hit the ground and probably not walk out of this thing. It catches a tree branch and bounces, and just the front teeth are knocked out. And he looks at her at that moment and he goes, there's something else remarkable here. Now, at the time, I was not out of the closet psychic, but initially I just got goosebumps and this total hit that, oh my God, this woman is pregnant. And that's why, because there's a higher power totally looking out for her and making sure she doesn't die. Yeah. Well, sure enough, seconds after, like, she tells her story and Matt asks that question, she goes, that's right, I'm pregnant.
Wow.
So that to me is angelic. We all have a friend, or we've heard a story of the sole survivor or the car accident where one person lives, or somebody says, I felt like I was transported out of the car and moved over. That is our angels. Now, it's not always so dramatic that they're in front of us, but they are always with us. Because we came here with a sole purpose. We're here for a very big reason that most of us ignore and try to hide and avoid. Hence bold moves and trying to inspire people to move big and bold in their lives. But the angels are here to help us with those bold moves. The angels are here. And here's the thing, guys, is like when you notice that everything seems to be working against you and you just can't seem to get the right thing, it's your angels. And there is a reason there's a rock in the road. It's because you are avoiding all the things that you really ultimately want to do, and you're trying to take the easy path, and they just keep making it harder.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I'm curious, if people are either in that circumstance that you just described and want to know what to do, and maybe they're not ready to hire a psychic to guide them and push them in the right direction, or if people are listening to you saying, you know, like talking about the little downloads or psychic hits, I think you called them, and can identify with that because maybe they've felt that way before too. How would you recommend for someone to kind of develop that intuition or get a little more in touch, turn the dial up from mute or to a little bit higher?
Well, I mean, not to plug myself, but you can subscribe right away to willowbradner.com and get my video, and it'll teach you exactly how to do this.
Okay, cool.
So it's a really easy little hour of time, and you'll learn what your intuition is and sort of how to crank the volume on it. But really the essence of intuition is understanding that it exists. One, again, it's that permission part, just knowing that in fact you do, and you're not crazy, and it's normal, and it's totally okay. Number two is finding yourself getting quiet. And when we hear people say get quiet, or we say get grounded, what both of these things mean is, can you turn the dial of your ego down? And the ego's essence is the judge that is constantly weighing on us. You're not good enough. You should. You're supposed to do this. What's your task list? Here's your to-dos. You're failing all the time. You're not good enough. It's that loud voice in our heads. It's the one that is literally shoulding all over our lives. And when you can turn the volume of that guy, gal down, that sort of mean, nasty, critical voice inside, and get a little still and what we call grounded, which is present, meaning, again, you're not future casting, you're not in the past, you're not dissecting your life forward or backward, but you are currently in the present moment. That's where you're going to keenly discover your intuition.
All right. That's a great tip. Now, and you mentioned going to your site and subscribing, and you have that great opt-in giveaway, which is fantastic. Where else can people find you online?
They can find me on Facebook, Willow Bradner. You can find me on Instagram. I am a regular social media person. You can, again, go to my website. I'm really easy to get to at this moment in time. So you're welcome to find me and text me, even questions. I don't mind at all.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'll make sure that all of those links are in the show notes so that people can access those easily. Now, you mentioned again in your rundown of your day and how your life is very normal, even though you have a job that most people would not consider normal. And you said PTA meetings. And I'm curious, I mean, I think around Denver, Boulder, this might not be as wild as, again, Michigan or Wisconsin, but how do people react when you tell them what you do and they say, oh, what do you do for a living? And you say, I'm an accidental psychic.
Yeah, it's interesting because that is something I'm still playing with that hat, if I'm honest.
A decade later.
A decade later. I mean, it's still a challenge because there's so much wrapped in our identities, and what we do and who we are. I went to a very sort of conservative, not being political, but just conservative group of people, predominantly white man business meeting in Chicago a couple months ago. And I decided to throw it out there because I just didn't care. And I just didn't have anybody to impress. And so I just kept saying psychic, psychic, psychic. And it was hilarious. Actually, it got me really comfortable with it. And as far as the people where I live, for the most part, there's some crooked eyeballs for sure. There's some curiosity, but most people, honestly, it's not that their dial is turned off. It's that their curiosity is piqued. Yeah. And so I have to have enough time when I say it out loud to be able to stand in the energy of both their curiosity and their doubt.
Sure.
And their criticism. And so that's a muscle that literally I think has taken 10 years to build. Yeah. It's just knowing that it's actually not personal and that the reactions that anybody has at any given point, and this is true of almost everything, the reactions that people have at any given point are almost never to do with us and always to do with them sourcing out their beliefs and their own judgments about it. So knowing that has helped me develop that. So at least at the PTA and some of those places, some people know, some people tiptoe around it. Some people are really into it and book wine and woos and schedule things with me. And some people don't. Yeah.
Wine and woo sounds amazing.
It's the best. If anybody lives in Colorado, I recommend it. You bring the wine, I bring the woo. You can invite all your girlfriends and I just do a big group reading and it's super hilarious and fun.
Oh, that sounds so fun. All right. So this may be something that comes up over and over again, like when you meet somebody and like you said, you have to hold the space for their doubt and their reactions and stuff. Or it may be the first time that you channeled, your grandfather. But I'm curious what the scariest moment in your life has been, or the scariest thing that you've been through.
I mean, I think giving birth to my child.
Yeah, I haven't given birth to a child, but that's definitely a big fear of mine.
Yeah, to me, that was honestly the scariest exciting thing ever. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that has really frightened me to that degree. I think honestly as well, like, I think we're always, all of us, pushing up against what I again call the edge, our threshold of comfort and fear. Like, we're all corralled into what we consider to be comfort. Mm-hmm. And what you notice is, like, let's use 2019. How many people have you heard say, I hate 2019. I'm so over 2019. Yeah. It's been such a hard year. It has been in a lot of ways, because the numerology and the astrological sort of implications of 2019 were all about self-love. And so we were running up against what I would consider to be the electric fence and kind of getting stung and kicked back. And that can be really scary to the system after a while. So for me, this year has been an edgy year and has been a really scary year. And I have really had to come to terms with a lot of my own personal fears. So that too is a cliff that I've been walking off of.
All right. I like the way you worded that. I'm curious if someone has, like, for example, I've heard a ton of people say that about 2019 also, but that hasn't really been my experience. Right. What do you think, like, how would you reconcile that reaction with the numerology and all of that? Like, what would
that yours has been an easier year than most?
Yeah.
Congratulations is how I would deal with that.
I'll take it. Thank you.
Good for you. Here's the thing is, like, not every year is going to hit everybody the same. It's like,
sure, of course.
Collectively, I've had really amazing years as well, like you. And then other people have had just terrible times. But I think it's like, you have to look at, again, sort of the snowflake effect of when you were born, what hour you were born, the family you were born to, sort of what is in your own astrological chart, not just the overall.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned, like, the snowflake effect, you mentioned numerology, astrology, and all of that. And your recommendations for reading might not be related to that, but I'm hoping that you have some in that area as well, since that's your expertise. But I'm curious about any book recommendations that you might have.
I suppose if you're looking to understand, I suppose the bigger picture of this, I have to say I'm a really grounded person in that the woo experience has been delightful for me, but I also am super grounded. So for those of you who are grounded and wary of this and curious but not sure, I would say that Gay Hendricks' The Big Leap is probably one of my most profoundly affected books that just changed my life. Again, it helps with sort of adding to the intuition, but as well understanding your sort of energetic edge so that you can make bold moves. Number 2 would be, if you want to go deep and you want to, like, really get into this, and by the way, it's not Audible, you have to buy it in paperback, is called Echoes of the Soul by Echo Bodine. And it is the most insane, crazy, like, picture of what I do and what intuitives and psychics do. And it really shows you the layers of this intuitive psychic world.
Okay, interesting. And then I didn't want to pigeonhole you and make you just choose woo sort of books. So if you have other book recommendations.
Well, Gay Hendricks is Big Leap is going to be for everybody. That one is literally, like, I mean, it's just one of the most remarkable books. And anybody who reads that is not going to feel wooed out or weirded out in any way.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just always am like, well, if she has a romance novel she likes that she wants to share, or a how-to book or something like that, I don't want to limit your book choices.
I did just finished Michelle Obama's book, and I'm honestly so depressed because I don't know what I'm going to read next. So if you guys have them, send them my way too. But holy cow, was that book just gorgeous and beautiful, and what a high respect I have for that woman and their experience.
Amazing. Well, there is a Bold Moves book list page where It's not complete, but I don't know what, like, around episode 275 or something, I'm like, they should all be on one page.
Yeah, good idea.
So it's been a labor of love to go back to old episodes and bring them into that, but I will send you the link so that you can peruse that.
Yes.
And yours will go there, of course, as well.
Perfect.
And I'll have yours in the show notes in addition to the Bold Moves book page.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. So you mentioned that I love the words that you use. You, like, continuously are walking off this cliff and, pushing boundaries and pushing past fear. And I imagine as well that sometimes when you're talking to your clients, they share that they're afraid of something and you help them go up against the electric fence, as you said, or push back against the angels trying to take them down their path. I'm wondering what advice you have for pushing past fear or feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I think, when your child was born, that wasn't much of a choice, and you just
right.
came.
I think the big thing that, how do I want to put it? The message that I got when I realized that I was really, truly psychic was that we can be and do anything we want. And I'll repeat those words because I really want to land these words. You can be and do anything you want. And how scary is that? That the only reason that none of us are exactly where we want to be is because of the F word, fear.
Okay.
The only reason we're not where we want to be is because of fear. And the reason that we're afraid is because of ages 1 to 8, we saw, experienced, and witnessed some aspects of life that were scary from 1 to 8 years old. Some things were scary. And we created coping mechanisms that again become sort of that electric fence, the electric collar. So when we get to certain edges of our lives, we sort of spring back. And it's not a matter of going around fear. It's not a matter of getting over fear. It's a matter of working through fear. Mm-hmm. And working through fear is really breaking down the aspects of yourself and speaking to it every day and saying, okay, why am I scared here? What pieces of me feel so frightened that they're not willing to go forward? And almost always they're irrational. But the rational ego's aspect is going to be, we don't have time, we don't have money, and we don't know how. Those are going to be the 3 rationalizations every adult makes for the reasons they're not going for their dreams. But actually, it's usually the inner child aspect of ourselves. It's like, that feels really scary, and I don't think people are going to like us. And what if I'm not good enough? And probably I'm going to get in trouble because it's probably not going to get along with what my parents had in mind for me.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that explanation. And the 1 through 8 thing will come up in a little bit, and it's interesting, I promise.
Okay.
Another thing that I like to ask, and because I imagine at some point your purpose maybe was around hair or making people feel good through doing their hair, and it's something that's dynamic for so many people, but I'm wondering if you're in touch with your current purpose or what your mindset is around purpose and how that relates to you.
Yeah. So I don't think my purpose has really changed all that much. Being with people for me is priority. Mm-hmm. When I read these books about people who are trying to scale their business model or scale to the point where they don't have to do anything and they can sit on a beach all day, I think, fuck, what am I supposed to do then?
Yeah.
Because I literally feel my purpose is just to be with people. And for whatever capacity, I'm not here to fix, I'm not here to change. I'm here, if I'm anything, is to inspire, but ultimately it's my curiosity of people. I want to know you, and I want to know why we aren't doing the things that we want to do. I want to know what is holding us back. It's truly like my full-time pursuit is trying to understand and get inside the human psyche as well as the human spirit to understand why we resolve to say no to the things we want and then yes to the obligations that are otherwise holding us back from the things we do want.
I love that.
That is my purpose. Yeah.
Now, just listening to you explain your purpose sounds an awful lot like if people only heard that part of the conversation, that they would guess that you're like a life coach or a therapist or something. Have you gone into any of that training too? Because I imagine that could become part of what you're doing with your clients, or is that just something that kind of comes naturally because of your passion?
Yes, I have done all the coaching stuff as well. The big thing is like, I guess if you're to look at me as just a psychic, yeah, it feels very one-sided, but it did as well as a hairdresser. A lot of people discounted me because, hairdressers are predominantly quote unquote dumb. But we're not. Over the course of the 20 years that I did hair, I saw over 3,700. I had over 3,700 appointments. I did the math because if anybody discounts another person's natural abilities to fine tune and hone into somebody, you have to understand that 3,700 appointments, that's not hours, guys. That's human beings in my chair. And any appointment was anywhere from 2 hours to 3 hours per human being in that time period. that makes me an expert on humankind as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't make me an expert in foil and color. It meant that I sat down with each individual for 2 hours of time and really listened and participated in their lives. I know their children, their husbands, their holdups, the things that struck them as odd and curious and hard. That's what I did for 20 years, was sit in space and holding hands with people who were going through everything from wonderful to terrible.
Yeah.
Over that time span. So while we attach certificates and expertise to certain things, it doesn't necessarily make somebody better than somebody else. It's really about trusting your intuition in terms of who you're going to hire in the future or who you want to hang out with. Because at the end of the day, you want to know that you're with somebody who hears you, sees you, and gets you.
That makes complete sense. And I'm sure most people have seen the different memes about how the hairstylist is also a therapist, or even primarily a therapist. And so that makes sense to me. And as a makeup artist, I've definitely dealt with the identity issues that go along with the fact that sometimes I feel like when I give that answer, I have to be like, but I almost have my master's degree, or like explaining, qualifying the fact that like, I'm not as dumb as you think.
And it all goes to, again, our version of we think we're not good enough, or we assume or imagine that other people aren't going to see our greatness. They're not going to see or witness us for who we know we are.
All right. So I almost feel like I feel like I identify with what you're saying a lot. And I almost feel like this past year, and it might be something to do with that self-love and numerology that you're talking about. But I feel like for me, it's almost been the reverse recently, where I'm seeing how other people see me. And I'm like, okay, one of my main goals, like I know there's like the meme or saying that's really cute where it's like, be the person your dog thinks you are.
Oh yeah, I love that.
I'm like, I need to become the person that like my husband and grandparents and like people closest to me think that I am, because I still have a bit of that imposter and like, well, they think I'm so successful and they think that I'm doing all this amazing stuff and I'm just kind of doing this. And so that's just been something that's been on my mind lately, more so than like, I need to convince these people that I'm worthy and cool. It's been the opposite, where I'm like, okay, first I need to live up to this idea that other people have of me, not in a pressure way, but in a healthy way, I feel like.
Well, and what I would probably say is like, it's dangerous to live up to anybody other than yourself. Like,
yeah,
I think the curiosity for me in that statement would be like, I think it's lovely how other people see us, if that's true. Yeah. If like the way that they're seeing us is the truth, versus like, if there's an ounce of, projection on what they want from you, or, that they're pedestaling you, then as well, it's like, who are you actually? And that needs to be portrayed more. And that's probably why, you mentioned earlier that I got a little personal. I usually do talk about poop and farting, because it really actually brings the pedestal just down to normal life. Mm-hmm. And it really does take like everything off the shelf. When you meet somebody who's like guru-esque or super successful, that doesn't make them human.
Okay.
And when like our grandparents and our husbands know that, we're pretty normal people on the outside, then really the curiosity is, how do we bring that into our everyday life? How do we bring it into our success? How do we start manufacturing the truth and not manufacturing the pretty picture?
I love that. That's great terminology, manufacturing the truth versus...
Like if I could tell you guys what I'm looking at right now, it is a dirty bed. I set up my bedroom, you guys, because it's the only soundproof room in the house. The house is disgusting right now. You guys should come over. It's a great time.
Well, we just moved in September, and as a entrepreneur and freelancer, for me, most days I'm like, all right, what do I need to do to make money? So there's so many boxes on this side that have not been unpacked, because I'm like, oh, I'll do that when, I'm not as worried about money, or on a day that I've gotten enough done that I can go to that backup plan of unpacking more. So,
and should we also say, bold moves, guys, take that. Bold moves are sometimes choosing the priorities that are in front of you, which are like, I want to do my business and I want to do my job and I want to do these things that are super like in front of me, not the dishes.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I always want to do just about everything except the dishes, but
Yeah,
that
ditto.
might just be me. All right. So I am curious. I feel like you've given so much value just organically in our conversation, but I always like to ask people if there's any advice or lessons or wisdom that's on their heart that they haven't been able to say so far. Is there any other message or something you learned recently that you wish you had learned 20 years ago or anything like that you want to share?
I mean, can we get woo here for a minute, you guys? Are
Of
you ready?
course. Let's do it.
So I did a reading last year that was so profound and changed me so much, speaking along the lines of fear. This woman had called, I was doing free readings for a business group, like little one-offs, and I just wanted to do the medium aspect to see if the medium aspect would translate into the business piece of work that I do. Mm-hmm. And she called and said she wanted to speak to her grandmother, and her question was, why am I so afraid? Well, and the question, I should be very clear. Why am I so afraid to put myself out there in my business? Now, she too was a little bit woo. She's a numerologist. Her grandmother came through right away, and her grandmother was a Holocaust survivor and had just recently passed. So here her granddaughter is asking why she is afraid. So I want you guys to understand that context, because it's like, here's a woman who lived through one of the greatest atrocities of humankind ever. Talk about being scared. And here her granddaughter is wanting to start a business of numerology and put herself out there, and is wondering why she is afraid. Her grandmother came through fiercely and forcefully, immediately saying, screaming through me, literally screaming, it's not your fear. And I want to land that there, because the way grandma says it in this is that the fear that most of us women are experiencing right now as we're pursuing our careers, as we're pursuing our dreams, it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to every woman who came before us. It belongs to the suffragette. It belongs to the woman who wanted to be something other than the societal norm, who was then hung or burned at the stake for being considered a witch. It belongs to every woman who's been undermined and undervalued. It belongs to every woman who decided to use her voice and then was hurt or beaten or disparaged as a result of it. So the fear that often we're experiencing, these edges, these electric fences, they are 1 to 8, ages 1 to 8 for us humanly, but it's also fear that doesn't belong to us. So if you can imagine all these layers as like, I'm getting closer to this curiosity and this purpose and this question, these answers just keep arriving of like what all of this is that's holding us back.
That's so fascinating. So I'm curious then, because one of the reasons why I do this podcast is selfishly because every time I get to have these conversations with people, I learn and I'm motivated and I'm inspired, and I've never made money from the podcast. It actually costs quite a bit of money to keep it going, but it's priceless to me because, once I'm done chatting with you today, I'm on fire and I'm going to go do things with more energy than if I had woke up and scroll through Instagram for an hour instead. And so I'm curious, in your position, having access as a medium to people who are incredible women and men, like Holocaust survivors or brilliant geniuses, like, can you just get whoever you want and be like, yo, Abraham Lincoln, I got a question about, and because I feel like
impeachment, no.
Exactly. How exactly do we do this? And I mean, because I feel like you have, inside access to the best and worst minds ever. And so I'm wondering how you can personally benefit from that then.
Such a good question. I wish I were dial up for the dead. I really wish that I could just 1-800 the people that I'd love to talk to. I think that for all of us individually, and even as a medium, like my job is to source psychic for other people, not necessarily for myself. Like I'm not winning the lottery because it's not in my purpose. It's not in my path. It's not in my blueprint, perhaps. I'm also not always going to get in touch with the people that maybe I'd be most curious about, or I didn't find Amelia Earhart, for instance, although I would have loved to. And I think the reason for that is that we're going to get the messages that we're really meant to get in our lives.
Sure.
And it's not to be a gratuitous experience for me or anybody else. So I'm only getting the messages that ultimately my spirit guides, my angels, and my loved ones really feel are current and appropriate for me, which is not to say that I haven't had other messages. That's just the one I'm sharing for this particular experience here at this podcast. But no, unfortunately, I'm not dial up for the dead, though I can meditate, the shit out of something to get the answers that I'm seeking. Oftentimes, though, not the answers I want. That's the other clarification for psychic is often we go to a psychic looking for the answers we want and we get the answers we need. And I think that can be the challenge as well.
All right, that makes sense. So now with this idea, and I know that religion has come up a couple of times and you gave your philosophy on it, do you get pushback from Christians, for example, who feel like you're doing sacrilegious things? And I'm wondering how you handle that and your philosophy there.
So this is such an interesting question. Of course, I mean, it goes without saying, but again, just so we're clear, I'm generally attracting people who want to do this thing. I am not on the streets being like, bitches, you need to get your psychic on. Everybody needs
should
psychic.
Try that one day.
It's
I think it would be funny.
But for the most part, I'm going to be the attractor to those who are interested in this modality, curious about it, if nothing else. But of the Christians who that is a concern for it, what I think is really interesting is I went to church with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and they had a minister talking about Jesus and how Jesus well, in one of the stories, and again, I didn't read the Bible, guys, so forgive me because I'm going to get it all wrong, but this man is very broken and very sick, and he crawls to this spring that is supposed to heal you, and so he's crawling there, and he can't get there, and meanwhile, other people are running and jumping in and getting healed and feeling great, and this one man on his own is crawling so hard and can't get there. And then he swaps to the story, the man who's delivering this message swaps to another story wherein these guys pick up their friend who is also quite sick and broken, and he can't walk to Jesus, and they carry him on their back, and they deliver him to a place where Jesus is giving a sermon, and they drop him down through the roof. And Jesus says to the man, but for the friends who carried you on their back, I heal you. Because of the friends who carried you on their back, I heal you. And to me, there's nothing more magical than that. And how is that not psychic? How is that not healing? How is that not impactful? As far as I'm concerned, like Jesus was magic. Jesus was healing people. He was doing all the things that I do. So how is that scary? I'm not saying I'm Jesus, just for any religious people out there. Just to clarify.
It's a good disclaimer.
Distinction that I'm trying to go for here. But what I am saying is like where religious sort of stories come from, so much of what we read in the Bible, so many of these stories, when we're dissecting them down, are quite intuitive, are quite psychic, are quite magical. So who are we to decide that people like myself can't do this little party trick?
I love that. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there are psychics and witches and all of that in the Bible that, Jesus was cool with. So,
right.
But I think that's a whole
J-man's up for it,
Well, I think that's a whole nother topic too, because I think a lot of the more conservative, politically and otherwise, Christians are being criticized for not following Jesus's footsteps and condemning so many groups. But I guess that's another discussion for another time.
Yes.
Pretty interesting. So I'm going to save my final question, or I'm going to use my final question now. And I always save it for last because it's my favorite. And I told you that I found it really interesting that you brought up ages 1 through 8, because this is over my 300th episode. I don't remember what exactly number this is going to be, but I always love to ask that if little 8-year-old Willow had a crystal ball, so that's already interesting. And I actually have my crystal ball for the question, but if little 8-year-old Willow had a crystal ball and could look through your life and see the story and see your wedding night and see all of your 3,700 clients before then. And then, you probably have an idea of what you're going to be doing in the new year, God willing. But little Willow could see the whole journey on a scale of 1 to 11. How excited would she be?
Oh my God. Goosebumps. Like so 11, I think. I think every day I'm getting closer to her dreams, if I'm honest. Like little 8-year-old Willow is, I think I feel like actually I'm meeting up with her right now, if I'm totally honest with that. Like, I feel like for the first time, I'm really looking at that time period of my life. I'm doing a lot of personally like therapy around it, because actually that 8-year-old self and all of us really should go back and just thank her or him, because they planted the seeds for where we are today, regardless if we're living in the actual imagination of what that character assumed we were going to be at this age or time. They still planted seeds of wisdom and imagination and just idealism. And if we could just go back, I feel like if nothing else, my little 8-year-old self would be very proud of the integrity that I have and the person that I've become, but ultimately as well, the ride, the journey, and the excitement that's in front of us.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Willow, it's been so fun chatting with you. I want to thank you for taking this time this morning to share your story and what you're doing in the world. I think it's really cool. And I just appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. And thank you for asking me some of the just more curious questions and how I get to function in the world with all the humans. I love it.
Okay, like I said, I hope you found that fun and interesting. And if you are a woo-woo person, make sure to go to the show notes, or I guess even if you're not, or if you're woo curious, head over to the show notes and get all of those links, book recommendations, ways to find Willow, and so on are all there, and I hope you take advantage of it. I also would love you to go there because I have different things that I offer in the show notes as well, such as the link to the book club group that we have that we're doing personal development reading together, and different other bonus giveaways and offerings that I have, like a guide to goal setting and achievement in 2020, and anything else that I think is valuable that you might like would all be at boldmovespodcast.com, or you can also find it at mandybryce.com, and it's Mandy with an I-E, then B like basketball, R-I-C-E. Now, when I'm sending you all over the place, I'm also going to ask you to share this episode if you think that it would be helpful to somebody, whether that's someone individually or sharing it across social media platforms. I would love to get in as many ears as possible, so I thank you very much for doing that. I'd also like you to subscribe if you don't mind. That way you won't miss an episode. I have a great challenge from Willow coming up this Friday that you won't want to miss, and subscribing will make sure you get an automatic download or a notification when that new episode is out, so that you are not left out and having that FOMO, fear of missing out situation. And I finally would like it if you would leave me some reviews on Apple Podcast. That is super helpful to me because it shows the algorithm that we're worth listening to, and then hopefully suggests it to other people to listen to as well. All right, that's enough requests for me. I hope that you have an amazing week. I guess that's kind of a request too, but I think you're able to handle that, hopefully. And as always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.